Alright, so welcome back. We're going to take the skills we learned in the last mini videos about equations, and we're not going to use those on what we call literal equations. And what literal equations are basically are formulas. So like y equals mx plus b, or distance equals rate times time, area is base times height, all those types of formulas that we have, and solving them for specific parts without having any other information. And so some people are like, but Mrs. Cartwright, why? Who would ever want to do this? Well, when you think to like scientists or mathematicians, people who gather data, if they're doing a lot of data analysis and they're needing to use the same formula over and over again, but to solve for a different piece of it, then it would be easier to have the equation written so that you just have to do the steps to get the answer to that variable. And so we're going to talk about how we do that. So here's this first one. We're first going to solve for y. And then we're going to find y when x is 3 and when x is 6. So first things first, I'm going to take this 10x plus 5y, and I am, maybe if it's going to turn on. There we go. Now it's back. All right, I want to solve for y. So what that means is I need to get my 10x away from the 5y. So I'm going to use my subtraction property of equality, and I'm going to subtract 10x to both sides. Now, notice I did not put this negative 10x underneath my 80, and the reason for that is because 80 does not have an x. They are not like terms, so they cannot be combined. And so I will have 5y equals, I like to put my x's first, negative 10x plus 80. Again, I cannot combine the 10 with the 80 because the 10 has an x and the 80 does not. The 10 is a coefficient, the 80 is a constant. All right, from there, to get y by itself, I'm going to use the division property of equality, and I'm going to divide everything equally by 5. And so now I'm going to end up with y equals negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2x, and 80 divided by 5 is 16. Sorry, I had to figure it out. All right, so that is my new equation. Now from here, having it in this form, I can take any and all x's, plug them into this equation, and I immediately know what y is without having to plug x in, multiply, subtract, divide. Because if I kept it in this original equation, then we would have to do this subtraction and this division every single time I tried to solve for y. Instead, by moving it to this new equation, y equals negative 2x plus 16, I can now plug in any x and I know my y value. So let's try that. If x is 3, my y, so I'm going to do y equals negative 2 times 3 plus 16. So y will equal negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6 plus 16. We have different signs, so we'll actually subtract. So y is equal to 10. And so that's the first answer, y equals 10. And then we do the same thing for when x is 6. So y equals negative 2 times 6 plus 16. Y will equal negative 2 times 6 is a negative 12 plus 16. So then y equals 4. Because negative 12 plus 16 is 4. And so then just by solving for y, we've made it easier each time we put in a different x. And so if there's a mathematician or a statistician just plugging in a whole bunch of x values because maybe x is the number of hours someone spends on a train or something, then they can easily find their y values, or more easily find their y values by only having to do the solving of the equation once. All right, next one. So here we have ax minus bx equals c. And so I'm going to, this one's a little bit more complicated. We are solving for x, so I need to get x by itself. And if you notice, it is with each of these. So I'm going to reverse the distributive property, right? I know that ax minus b is equal to x times a minus b. So I basically just did the opposite of distributing, which is technically called factoring. So I factor out my x. From here, to get x by itself, kissing leads to multiplication. So the opposite of multiplying is to divide by that a minus b. So we're going to, what I do to one side, I have to equally do to the other side. And so over here, that goes away. And so now I know that x equals c divided by a minus b. Now, if you need that help, like, I'm not insisting you do this, but basically, we're doing the same things we've done before, right? Distribute, because it was this distributive property that told me I could bring the x out. And then I used that division property of equality. I'm still using all those same steps that we did before. It's just that I'm not going to simplify down to a number. This is our answer. This is the new equation. I can figure out x if I know what c, a, and b are, and I can do it pretty quickly in this new form. All right, here's our next one. It's the circumference formula, and I want to solve for r. Well, this one's actually really easy. This is 2 times pi times r, and the opposite of multiplying is to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 2 pi, because that will simplify it down to just r on the right side. So I'm going to make it r equals, and it's going to be circumference divided by 2 pi. And that's our answer. Circumference divided by 2 pi. And then I could say, okay, I could give a circumference. Like, what is the radius if the circumference is 30? And then I could do 30 divided by 2 times pi. And I would get what r is. All right, so this next one is just a list of all the formulas or most common formulas that you may need, just to give you something to go off of so that when you have word problems, you have a list of formulas to go to. All right, so here we're talking about the monarch butterfly, only butterfly that migrates annually north and south. The distance of this particular monarch butterfly's travels is 1,700 miles. It takes a typical butterfly 120 days to travel one way. What is the average rate at which the butterfly travels in miles per day? So if I were to look back at these, I know distance and I want to know rate. So when I'm looking at these, I've got distance, I've got time, and I need to know rate. So that is going to help me. I want d equals rt. So I'm going to come back over here. I know I'm using d equals rt, and I want to solve for rate. And so that's my r. Opposite of multiplying is to divide. So r is going to equal d divided by t, because I'm going to divide both sides by t. And so rate is distance divided by time. I know that my distance is 1,700 and that my time is 120 days. And I want to know miles per day. So my rate is going to be 1,700 divided by 120, and 1,700 divided by 120 is 14.1. I'm going to double check this. Maybe if I can find my phone with my calculator. 1700 divided by 120 is 14.16. Maybe, there it is. 16. And the 6 is repeating, so I can make it 14.16 or 14.2. It wants nearest miles per day, so actually nearest mile, it'd be 14. So 14 miles per day is approximately how fast those butterflies travel. And that's how we figured it out. And that is it for literal equations. Now here's the thing, you're going to want to make them much harder than they are, but really we are doing all the same steps. If the equation's multiplying, your opposite thing is to divide both sides. If you're adding or subtracting, you do the opposite. So don't think too hard about these. Just do what you know about equations and ask if you have questions. Until next time, 8th graders.